Montana Territory, January 1883. The wind howled like it had a grudge, sweeping over the snow-covered plains and tearing through the narrow canyon east of Wolf Creek. Kade Hollis leaned low in the saddle, his coat stiff with sleet, eyes narrowed against the sting of cold. He had been riding since dawn, trying to get ahead of the storm, when his horse stopped short and snorted. At first, he thought it was a trick of the snow, just a shape crumpled against a bare patch of rock near the creek bed. But then the shape moved. He climbed down, boots crunching through crusted ice, and knelt beside the figure. It was a woman. Her coat was torn, soaked through, and her hands were bare, red and swollen with frostbite. She was curled up tight like a child, her lips cracked and blue. Her hair was a mess of dark curls matted with ice. She looked up, dazed, barely able to lift her head. "Leave me," she rasped, her voice raw and broken. Kade pulled off his gloves and touched her cheek, trying to rouse her. "No," he said, quiet but firm. "Never again." She blinked slowly, like she was trying to place him, but there was no recognition in her eyes, only pain. "I can walk," she whispered, though she could not even sit up. Kade ignored that. He wrapped her in his blanket, hoisted her gently into his arms, and carried her to his horse. Her hands brushed his chest, limp and cold. He could feel how light she was. He had seen folks freeze before they stopped feeling anything near the end. "You are not dying out here," he muttered, more to himself than her. The ride back to his cabin was brutal. Snow came hard and fast, the wind pushing them sideways. Kade kept one arm around her the whole way, her head slumped against him. She never spoke again until he carried her inside and laid her on the cot near the fire. The cabin was small, just one room, built with his own hands. He had not brought anyone here, not once since his brother died 2 winters back. But now there was a stranger in his bed, and her hands were worse than he thought. She started to shiver violently once the warmth hit her. He stripped off her wet clothes, wrapped her in wool, and rubbed her arms to get the blood moving. Her hands were stiff, her fingers dark at the tips. He poured warm water and soaked them, careful and quiet. She winced, but did not cry. He saw her watching him, eyes wide and wary. "What is your name?" he asked, voice low. "Zadie," she whispered. "Zadie Darnell," he nodded. "Kade Hollis, you are safe now." She looked away, jaw tight. "You should not have brought me here. You would have died," he said simply. "I do not want your help." "That is too bad," he said, meeting her eyes. "You got it." She looked like she might argue, but then her face crumpled just for a second. She turned from him, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders. For the next few days, Kade did not press her. He changed the bandages on her hands, made her broth from salted meat and potatoes, and kept the fire fed. She barely spoke. She would not let him touch her except when he had to. But she watched him. That much he noticed. One night, while snow still piled up outside, she finally asked, "Why did you say never again?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I let someone go once. My brother. During a hunt. He got lost in a storm, and I figured he would find his way back. He always had before. But he never came back." Zadie turned her face toward the fire. "I lost people too. Family," she nodded, eyes wet. "My husband 2 winters ago, then I was alone, and then I had 2 children, Liam and Laura. I left them with a woman near Billings while I looked for work. I was going to send money, but I never made it." Kade's chest ached. "You were trying to get back to them." "Yes," she whispered. "I took a wagon north with a ranch hand. He left me when the trail froze over. I walked days. I thought I could make it." Kade swallowed hard. "You still can." Her eyes met his. "My hands, I will take you to them," he said. "As soon as you are strong." Zadie shook her head. "You do not even know me." "I do not have to," he said, "but I will." Zadie stared at him a long time, then she nodded softly. The next week passed slow but steady. Her color came back, and Kade found her smiling once when a deer passed by the window. She still winced when he cleaned her hands, but she let him now. She even joked once, quiet, dry, but it was something. One morning after breakfast, she stood on her own and reached out to him, her wrapped fingers brushing his arm. "Thank you," she said. Kade looked down at her. "You do not have to thank me." "I do," she said. "You saved me." That night she sat beside him near the fire. When he handed her a mug of tea, their hands touched and she did not pull away. She looked up at him. "I never thought anyone would come for me," she said. Kade met her gaze. "You were not meant to be left behind." Zadie's eyes filled, but she did not cry. She just leaned her head gently against his shoulder. It was the first time in years the cabin felt like a home again. The sun rose sullen behind a drift of gray clouds, casting a muted light through the cabin's single window. Zadie sat at the table, her shoulders wrapped in a shawl Kade had found in an old trunk beneath the cot. She held a tin cup between her bandaged hands, warming her fingers against the steam rising from it. Her eyes followed the movement of his boots as he stepped inside, snow melting off his coat in slow drops. "You found the fence line?" she asked. He nodded, setting down a bundle of kindling. "North stretch held. A couple rails caved under the weight, but I propped them up for now." She watched him work the latch on the stove, his hands sure and quiet. "You live off this land alone?" "I do. No hired men. No need," he said. "The cattle stay low this time of year." "I don't keep more than I can handle." Zadie sipped slowly. "You built this place yourself," he glanced over his shoulder. "Took 2 summers. Hauled the timber down from the ridge. My brother helped lay the stone." She nodded, eyes falling to the rough floorboards. "I used to think I'd settle somewhere like this. Not so cold, maybe, but with land. A garden, hens, space to breathe. You still could." Zadie's gaze lifted, cautious. "I can't even hold a spoon without dropping it. You'll heal." She looked down at her hands, wrapped in worn linen strips. "Maybe not enough." Kade stepped closer and leaned a hip against the table's edge. "You didn't lie in that snow because you were weak. You made it farther than most would have dared." She held his eyes, something flickering behind hers, half disbelief, half a need she was too afraid to name. "You don't know what I've done." "I will if you want to tell me." Zadie set the cup down, slow and careful so it wouldn't tip. "After my husband died, there was a man he said he'd help. Promised work on his cousin's farm, said he knew someone with land to lease." I believed him. Kade waited silent. "He took everything I had, even the boots off my son's feet. Then he left us on the edge of Miles City, said he'd be back with a wagon. He never came." She didn't cry. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I begged for food for my children. I cleaned stables, chopped kindling, anything someone would trade. I sold the ring my mother gave me, and when I couldn't give them more, I left them with a woman who ran a boarding house. She had 6 of her own. I told myself I'd be back before spring." "You will be," Kade said. Zadie looked at him, uncertain. "I have enough saved to get us to Billings," he said. "You and me will find them." Her jaw tightened. "You don't owe me this." "I don't do it out of debt." Zadie's voice dropped. "Then why?" He hesitated, then said, "Because the first time I saw you, I thought you were already gone, but you weren't. You were still breathing, still hanging on. And I knew whatever you'd gone through, you didn't quit." Zadie blinked, slow. "You talk like you've carried something heavy." "I have." She didn't press. A pine knot popped in the stove, and the silence stretched in the warmth between them. Kade moved to the cupboard and pulled down a small tin. "I found this last fall," he said, setting it on the table and opening the lid. Inside were dried apples, wrinkled but golden. "Saved them for winter." Zadie looked at them, then up at him. "You're sharing them with me. You've earned more than apples." She smiled, faint and crooked. "I haven't smiled in a long time. I know." She took a slice, bit into it, and chewed slow. I used to dry apples on a line behind the house. My daughter would sneak them when she thought I wasn't watching. What's her name? Laura. She's 5. Liam's 8. He's quieter. Reads anything he can get his hands on. Sounds like someone I'd get along with. Zadie offered the tin back, but he pushed it toward her. Keep it near you. Her eyes softened. You don't treat me like I'm a burden. You're not. She looked down again, and when she spoke, her voice was low. I didn't think kindness like this still existed. He reached across the table, and though he didn't touch her, his hand paused close to hers. It does. Just doesn't shout its name. They sat like that until the wind eased outside and the cabin settled into a hush that felt almost like peace. The thaw came slow that February, the kind that didn't announce itself with green buds or songbirds. Just a change in the air, a softness to the wind, a gentler drip from the eaves. Zadie stood at the edge of the porch, bundled in Kade's second-best coat, watching the snow pull back from the base of the trees like a curtain drawn open a crack. Her breath no longer came in clouds. Kade stepped out behind her, brushing sawdust from his sleeves. Stirred up a grouse 2 ridges over. Might go back tomorrow, see if it's nesting early. Zadie nodded, eyes still on the horizon. You always this quiet when you talk. He looked at her sidelong. Only when I don't have much to say. That can't be true, she said, turning. You built a life out here. I figure there's 1,000 stories in your head. He leaned against the post. Most of them don't end well. Then tell me one that does. He tilted his head. You asking out of curiosity or kindness? Maybe I just want to know what you sounded like before the world got so heavy. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. All right. When I was 16, I tried to break a Mustang over near Judith Basin. Took the horse from a trader who said it couldn't be done. Did you? No. It threw me into a creek and kicked me in the ribs. My brother laughed so hard he dropped his rifle. Zadie's laugh came soft and real, and Kade looked at her fully then, watching the way the light caught the edge of her hair. I miss hearing that, he said. She met his gaze. I miss being that. They stood in the quiet for a long moment before she asked, Do you think I'll still be a mother when I see them again? Kade's brow furrowed. What do you mean? They've had someone else feed them, teach them, rock them to sleep. What if they don't remember me the way I remember them? They will, he said. Children don't forget what love smells like. Zadie looked down. And what if I can't do the things I used to? What if my hands don't come back the way they were? Then you'll find new ways. You're clever enough. She studied him a moment. You always believe in people this easy, he shook his head. Just you. Her breath caught. She turned back to the trees, but her fingers drifted toward his, brushing his knuckles. He didn't pull away. That night, she peeled potatoes by steadying them between her palms and cutting with short, careful strokes. Kade watched from the table, whittling a sliver of pine into a small horse for Laura. He didn't offer help, just watched, letting her prove to herself what she could do. I used to make dolls out of corn husks, she said, concentrating on the knife. Laura liked the ones with braids. I'll find some husks come harvest. Zadie set the knife down and flexed her fingers. You planning to keep us here? He looked up. Only if you want to stay. And if I don't, then I'll take you where you need to go. She studied him, quiet and uncertain. You'd give this up, he set the carving down. I built this life because I didn't think I had another one coming. But if I do, it's not tied to this cabin. Zadie reached across the table, placing her hand over his. There were scars between her fingers now, pale and healing, but her grip was steady. I want something small, she said. A garden, a patch of land. A place where Liam can read in peace and Laura can chase chickens. Kade turned his hand up, lacing his fingers with hers. Then we'll find it, together. She nodded, eyes bright. And maybe, if you're lucky, I'll let you try riding that Mustang again. His grin came slow. And if I break my ribs again, I'll laugh harder than your brother did." He watched her laugh again, full and unguarded, and knew deep in his chest he would follow her anywhere. The wagon was packed by early March. A single chest held her few things: a dress with the hem mended twice, a carved comb missing 2 teeth, and a torn letter folded so many times it felt like gauze. Kade packed tools, dry goods, and a bolt of homespun he'd traded for in Helena the summer before. The snow had melted down to brown earth in patches, and the air carried the scent of pine warmed by sun. Zadie stood beside the wagon tongue, her hand resting against the rough wood. "You ever been east of Bozeman?" "Not since my father hauled us west in a freight line," Kade said, tightening the cinch on the lead mare. "I was 12. Everything smelled of axle grease and wet leather." She tilted her head. "That the last time you traveled with anyone?" He glanced at her. "Other than cattle, yes." She didn't press. Instead, she stepped up into the wagon bed and settled onto a folded blanket. Her hands still ached in the morning, but she could hold a teacup now without shaking, and she could tie her own laces. The skin had healed in uneven ridges, but she said nothing of it anymore. Kade climbed up beside her, the reins loose in his lap. "You sure you're ready for the road?" "I've been ready since I woke up in your cabin," she said. "I just didn't know it yet." They moved out slow, the wagon creaking as it rolled past the last row of fence posts and into the wide open plain. The horses breathed in rhythm, heads low, hooves muffled by damp earth. Zadie watched the trees fall away behind them, lips parted like she was tasting every shift in the wind. By the second day, they'd left the hills behind. The road turned to packed dirt, and the sky stretched so wide it seemed to press down on them. They camped near a stand of cottonwoods, and Zadie cleaned the tin plates while Kade saw to the horses. When he returned, she was stirring embers into flame. "You ever think about what you'll say to them?" he asked, settling opposite her. She moved the kindling with a stick. "Every hour. But none of it holds together long. They'll just want to see you." "I know," she said. "But I want to be more than just someone who came back." Kade leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You already are." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small wooden spoon, the bowl slightly scorched. "Liam carved this with a jackknife he wasn't supposed to have. I carry it everywhere." Kade reached forward and turned it gently in his fingers. "He'll be proud you kept it." Zadie rested her chin on her knees. "What about you? What do you want waiting at the end of all this?" He looked at the spoon in his palm. "Something quiet. Somewhere I can wake up and know the world isn't going to change all over again." She watched him, her face unreadable. "That place have room for more than one?" He met her eyes. "Yeah. It does." They didn't speak again that night, but when she lay down beneath the wagon canvas, she didn't turn away as he settled beside her. The space between them narrowed until her shoulder brushed his. On the 4th day, they passed through a valley where the grass was already pushing up green. A small ranch house stood in the distance, with smoke curling from the chimney. A boy rode past them on a paint pony, barefoot and laughing. Zadie followed him with her eyes until he disappeared into the brush. "I forgot what it sounded like," she said. "What?" "Laughter that isn't weighed down." Kade clicked the reins gently. "You'll hear it again, in your own house." The road turned rocky after that, winding through sagebrush and low ridges. They stopped near a shallow stream to water the horses. Zadie knelt to rinse her hands and cupped the cold water to her face. "You think they'll be angry?" she asked, voice low. "They might be confused," he said, tying off the lead rope. "But they'll see you standing there, that's what matters." Zadie stood, brushing her skirt. "And if they don't remember the sound of me," he walked to her and reached for her hand. "Then you'll remind them, day by day, until it's the only sound they want." She looked up at him, the sun catching her lashes. You speak like you've already imagined it. I have. His voice was steady. Because I'll be there to see it. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, close enough that her forehead touched his chest. Kade stood still, his hand resting lightly on her back. Neither of them moved for a long time, and when she finally leaned back, her eyes were wet but calm. "When we get there," she said, "will you come inside with me?" "I will." "And after?" "That depends," he said. "You planning to send me off?" "No," she said, voice sure now. "I'm planning to ask you to stay." The road dipped into a shallow valley as the wagon creaked toward the edge of Billings. Smoke twisted gently from stone chimneys, and wagons rolled slow along the main street, wheels dragging through patches of thawed earth. Zadie sat upright, heart thudding in time with the horse's hooves. Her fingers curled in her lap, wrapped around the wooden spoon Liam had carved. She hadn't spoken much since dawn. Kade kept his eyes forward, but his hand rested steady on the reins. "You said the boarding house was near the livery," Zadie nodded once. "2 streets over. A painted fence, chipped white. There were hollyhocks last time. I don't know if they'd still be standing. We'll find it." As they reached the livery, Kade reined in beside a hitching post. Zadie climbed down without help, her legs stiff from the days of travel, but she didn't falter. She stepped onto the boardwalk, breath shallow. The house stood just beyond the corner, smaller than she remembered. The fence leaned now and the flower bed was bare, but the windows were open to the sun, and a child's coat hung from a peg near the door. Zadie moved forward, one hand trailing the fence rail. When the door opened, a girl with a ribbon in her hair stepped out, blinking at the light. She looked older than 5 now, taller, her cheeks less round. But Zadie knew her even before the girl gasped and called over her shoulder. "Mama!" Zadie dropped to her knees in the dirt path as Laura launched herself forward. She caught her daughter in both arms, heart breaking open with the weight of it. Laura clung to her neck, small fingers digging into her shawl. "I missed you," the girl whispered. "I kept waiting." "I came back," Zadie said, voice thick. "I promised I would." Another voice called from the doorway. Liam stepped out, taller than she remembered, clutching a book against his chest. He didn't run. He stood still, watching, cautious. Zadie rose, her arm still around Laura. "Liam," she said gently, "I'm here." He came slowly, eyes searching her face, stopping just short of touching her. "You look different," he said. "I know," she whispered, "but I never stopped loving you, not one day." He reached forward and placed the spoon in her hand. "I thought you dropped it." "I never let it go." He leaned into her then, his head pressing against her shoulder. She wrapped both arms around her children, holding them as if anchoring herself to the earth. Behind her, Kade stood in the shadow of the porch, hat in hand. The woman who'd cared for the children stepped out and gave him a long look. "They've been well," she said. "But they've missed her something fierce." "She missed them more," Kade said. The woman nodded. "She going to keep them now. She's not letting them go again." That evening, Kade stood beside the wagon as Zadie packed the children's few things into a satchel. Liam folded his books carefully and Laura tucked her ribbon into Zadie's coat pocket. The woman watched from the porch, arms crossed but face soft. "I'll miss them," she said. "I'm grateful," Zadie replied, "for every day you gave them." "You're sure you've got a place?" Zadie looked toward Kade. "We will soon." They rode out the next morning, the 4 of them filling the wagon bed with blankets and laughter. Laura leaned against Zadie's side, small hand tucked into hers. Liam sat near Kade, asking about the trail and pointing out birds in the sky. By afternoon, the land rolled into quiet hills, and a thin ribbon of creek glinted in the distance. Kade reined toward a low rise with a view of the valley below. There, tucked between 2 cottonwoods, stood an old homestead roof sagging but walls intact. The well was still capped and a chicken coop leaned out behind it. "You said you wanted a garden," Kade said. Zadie stepped down, her boots sinking into soft loam. She walked the length of the porch, then turned and faced him. "This place, how long's it been empty?" "5 years," he said. "Belonged to a couple who moved to Kansas. I traded for it last spring, kept it in mind, never knew for who." Liam stood beside her, eyes wide. "Can we stay here?" Zadie looked at Kade. "We can," he nodded once. "It's yours if you want it." She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You'd stay too." "I thought I might build a barn," he said. "And a schoolroom if Liam needs it." Zadie rested her hand against his chest. "And what if I need you?" He bent his head, forehead brushing hers. "Then I'll never leave." She kissed him then, slow and certain, with the wind rising soft around them like the promise of spring. The children chased one another through the grass, shouting with joy, while Kade and Zadie stood in the sun-drenched yard, arms wrapped around each other, their future unfolding in quiet certainty. That summer, they planted rows of beans and corn, and Zadie taught Laura how to braid stems into crowns. Kade built a porch swing and read aloud to Liam in the evenings. They slept with the windows open and woke with the sound of birds in the rafters. The scars on Zadie's hands faded into pale lines, and Kade's silence softened into laughter. They married beneath the cottonwoods with just the children and the woman from the boarding house as witness. No vows were spoken beyond what they already lived: kindness, steadiness, and the promise of staying. And they did. Together they built a life not out of what had been taken, but out of what remained: each other, the land, and a love that had been earned day by day without rush or fear. It was a quiet joy, the kind that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be felt in every breath and every morning's light. They never wandered again.